Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of ACC Audible. Ian and Ken are here with you to talk about a whole bunch of different random topics this week. Not really going to go over a lot of stats. We're kind of just going to vent some opinions on a few things that we've seen this season that have kind of ticked us off. First of all, our conference sucks. So that's a good stepping point. But in all honesty, guys, it's been a huge disappointment this season. There were a few teams that looked like they would shine, and they just really looked terrible. But I guess coming into the season, we really knew it was Clemson and then a bunch of nobodies, so it kind of makes sense. If anything, great job by the University of Virginia, kind of repping the conference, playing decently well. But all these other teams, we've seen Georgia Tech lost to the Citadel. Like what? Like, I know, Jeff Collins, it's your first year, and sure, you beat South Florida. It shows how bad they are. But man, the Citadel. I saw a sign at game day last week with a Georgia fan that said, we want the Citadel or something like that. But man, there's a lot of awful things going on in the ACC, including the ACC Network. And I'm going to bring in one of my good friends and my favorite person to talk about college football with to discuss all of these things and go on massive rants with me, Mr. Ken from down in Florida. Ken, how you doing?
Hey, it's still hot down here, just FYI. So, yeah, it's I don't know if you can do anything about that, but I'm really wanting some nicer weather. I would love that, actually.
Well, up in Michigan, it's already fall. Well, officially fall as of this week. Everywhere, I guess, but it's getting cool and crisp at night. It's nice, but we've actually been a little unseasonably warm. It's been really, really nice the past week or two, which is pretty shocking. But I'll be in Blacksburg this weekend. The weather looks fantastic for down there. Do a little hiking, do a little football watching. So it should be a good time there. But weather does change your mood a lot, and it can definitely change how you watch football. So I do love those games when it's 18 degrees and I'm wearing my, big camo jacket and stuff, but I love being in a t-shirt too.
It was 97 degrees here today, man. I'm just
wow.
Yeah, it's
at least you don't have
hot.
any humidity.
Dude, so you're gonna do a little tailgate for old Duke Virginia Tech, huh?
Yeah. Gonna go down with 4 or 5 friends from here in Michigan, and then meet up with I think 4 or 5 friends from down there who I usually tailgate with, and it should be a real good time. Just it's always kind of awkward on a Friday night game, just because usually we'll have the other games on TV while we're tailgating. We'll be playing games and cooking tons of food on this big skillet my friend Ryan brings and grilling and stuff. But just without all the games on, what are we going to watch? And so my friend Lucas texted me today and said, dude, I can't wait to watch The Price is Right at our tailgate on Friday. And in case you guys didn't know, The Price is Right just started a new season this Monday. I didn't realize they did seasons since they batch record, but apparently they do. So if you guys, this week is Mega Prize Week, where they give away a bunch of extra random big prizes on The Price is Right, and Drew Carey is awesome. So if you guys are free from 11 to 12 on CBS, they paid me to say that. Okay, so moving on to to some of our first stuff. Dude, you literally, before we started talking tonight on the podcast, you said, man, the ACC Network is killing me. But it's the same broadcast team as ESPN. The schools each invested multi-millions of dollars in it, and the payout is promised to be huge for these schools. Why do you not like it, man? Honestly, on the surface level, it does everything great for athletic departments. The quality of broadcast is so much better than Raycom used to be. Why do you not like it?
Well, first of all, don't talk crap about Raycom. Let's get that out of the way first.
Well, I would just like to say the last football game ever aired on Raycom, there were 2 of them that happened at the same time. But Virginia Tech and Marshall, when that happened last year, was tied for the last football game on Raycom. And I shed a tear. I really did enjoy the old Raycom Sports Network. They're awful graphics. They're below average commentators. Something was just right about it,
Pretty sure Tommy Bowden worked for Raycom, so you kind of lets you know the state of Raycom.
He was like the anchor. I mean,
yeah,
he was the anchor of Raycom. He was always there, always in the studio. Every once in a while did some games. A consistent performer. I mean, low par, but he was consistent.
Dude, think about this actually for a second. This is like a random tangent, but the last coach to coach Clemson before Dabo Swinney was Tommy Bowden. Let that sink in for a second. Like, that's how long it's been. That's how long Dabo's been there.
Yeah, it's actually kind of interesting because Dabo, he didn't really win at first, right? Now, obviously, it was a pretty quick turnaround, but it was halfway through that 2008 season, I think, when Tommy resigned.
Yeah, I think so.
And Dabo came in there, and he won his national championships in 2016, 2018. So it took him a good 8 years to win. But yeah, he's a very interesting guy for sure, in that he came in as a wide receivers coach, a guy without a lot of experience. But yeah, man, taking over for Tommy Bowden, that's pretty interesting.
Hey, Clemson fans, remember that one time that West Virginia dropped 70 on you guys in the Orange Bowl?
Ooh.
Oh, man. Wow.
Those are
you know
good
what?
times.
I only say that because I'm just jealous now because it's Clemson and everyone else in the conference. Well, except for Virginia, which I don't know. What do you think about Virginia, man? I kind of think they might be fraudulent, honestly. They had a close game against Florida State, who's garbage this year, and then they struggled against Old Dominion. I don't know. What's your take on the Hoos?
Yeah, the Hoos are an interesting football team for sure. I always pick against them. That's, I guess, the bottom line here. And I always have been getting it wrong lately. And so, obviously, the last 2 weeks, I've actually gone with them, and they did pull out those wins against Florida State and Old Dominion. You know, this reminds me of that Miami team from a couple years ago. Remember when Miami barely beat Georgia Tech? Then they barely beat you guys, Florida State, by a point in a game you guys probably should have won. A lot of really, really close games, and we didn't really think Miami was that good. We said, look, they're winning these games barely against teams they should be beating by a lot. They're not for real. And then Miami played 2 primetime games in which they cleaned up Virginia Tech and they cleaned up Notre Dame's clocks in seasons that were pretty good for those two teams overall. So maybe Virginia's in the same boat. Like you said, against Florida State, not a very impressive win. They had to come back in the fourth quarter there. Against Old Dominion, also a comeback. They won by 11, but still not very clean. But I'll tell you, that Pittsburgh win week 1 looks better and better. Pittsburgh had beaten Bronco Mendenhall's team the first 2 seasons he coached UVA. And then they went to Pittsburgh for the opening game, and they beat them by a couple of touchdowns. A very, very good game from UVA. So I think they are a pretty good football team. But the first 2 weeks of the season, I was more positive on them than now. The ODU win didn't look that good. I saw ODU play against Virginia Tech, and they weren't incredibly impressive. Nowhere near as good as they were at parts of last season. So heading into this game this weekend, obviously they play at Notre Dame, the classic 3:30 NBC game, and then they go at Miami with an 8 o'clock game. It's going to be pretty interesting to see if Virginia's real or not. These next 2 weeks will tell for sure, but it's hard to say. I think they actually are good. I don't think they're great by far, but a lot of these players that are making big plays for him, Perkins, for example, at quarterback, he's a guy that we saw make great plays last year. So there's nothing new. They've just slowly gotten better. I'm curious to see. It's a roster where there's 5 or 6 really talented guys, and everyone else is pretty mediocre, which is a pretty good roster for a ranked team. You're not going to win a national championship, but a pretty good roster. Compare that to some other teams. I wonder how the depth is going to be after this season, or if some injuries happen. If you lose one of those 5 or 6 good players, I don't think they have anyone behind them. So versus a Notre Dame, which always is a player to step up. So I don't know this weekend. I guess I'd have to say Notre Dame probably. I'm gonna pick in that game. But I think Virginia is a good, possibly double-digit win team this year. Just looking at their schedule, looking at what they've done so far, absolutely. I think they're. If you're going to say they're going to beat Clemson, yeah, they're fraudulent. But for a 10-win team, no, they definitely can do it.
I guess I just meant fraudulent in that, should they be in the top 25? I guess the sad thing is they're considered the second best team in the conference right now. And they struggled against Old Dominion. Our conference this year is just really not good. And, of course, I don't think they're going to beat Notre Dame this year, although I do think that's going to be a closer game in the first half than people think. Notre Dame, big game against Georgia in which they really acquitted themselves well. Virginia, they look like one of those teams that's going to play down or up to their competition, to be quite honest.
Absolutely.
So I'm interested to see when they play better teams like a Notre Dame, if they come out and show themselves well, or if they just get overwhelmed by the talent and the coaching. And I do like Bronco Mendenhall, but we'll see. I'm interested. I'm going to watch that Notre Dame game. Very interested. I'll tell you that.
I saw some coaching rumors today. Jim Harbaugh's in the hot seat. Blah blah blah. And there was some joking rumors about Urban Meyer possibly being the next head coach of Michigan.
Oh,
well, there was also a couple
happen.
of other names. I know, wouldn't that be amazing?
Please let
There
that
were a
happen.
couple other names in the list, and one of them was Bronco Mendenhall, man, because they see him as, Michigan's always looking for that Michigan man, and they see him as like a preppy, like well put together type of guy, right? UVA is a very, formal, nice school in that way, and Michigan thinks that they're cut out in the same mold. So it's kind of funny to see that versus guy who's been, called a cheater in Urban Meyer and all these things repeatedly as some of your coaching candidates. But as of now, they're still going with old Jim Harbaugh. That's a whole nother conversation to have. I do feel bad for some of my Michigan friends with some of that. But yeah, just to hear Bronco's name be called up for a huge job like that shows really how much national attention his rebuild at Virginia is getting. As you said, Virginia is the second best team in the conference. There's only 2 ACC teams ranked right now. But as you know, rankings are garbage. And early in the season, a lot of it is just for TV ratings. And you look at a team like Wake Forest, for example. Wake Forest is sitting at 4-0. Sure, they don't have a lot of great wins, but UNC's an okay win. Utah State could actually be a pretty decent win. They always seem to be good. But Wake is 4-0, and they're receiving basically no attention. If they end up going out and beating Boston College this weekend and then beating Louisville, then I'm sure they'll get some. But there are some ACC teams that are sitting on perfect records out there, those 3 teams. So it's just the conference definitely is down this year. Virginia is clearly the second best looking team so far. I think they're gonna hang in with Notre Dame. When you come off an exhausting game like they did against Georgia, where you suffer a defeat towards the end of the game where you close it up and you kind of have a chance to win, but then you don't. That has to be defeating, especially because they just lost to them up in South Bend a couple of years ago. So I could see this being one of those letdown trap games where Virginia comes in and does beat them. You never know. And Virginia's defense is playing really well, but their offense is doing even better. They put up 141 points so far this year, which is the best in the Coastal by far. So who knows? It could be a good contest this weekend. I don't think they're a fraud. I think they're a solid team, and probably the team to win the Coastal. Honestly, it's going to be hard to catch them.
Yeah, I mean, the Coastal's just nuts, man. The Coastal's insane. Georgia Tech's terrible, but I could see them getting a crazy win this year. Pitt this year, oh my gosh, well,
they're typical Pitt.
That Pitt, yeah, they get one solid win every year that somehow saves Narduzzi's job. He'll hang on one more year. They'll probably beat Alabama next year or something. It's insane to watch that team play, and how I'm sure Pitt fans have to be just going nuts when they play like that, and it's well, where is this every week? But that's just not old Narduzzi's MO. He's got to be up and down. He's all about the hills and valleys, man.
Yeah, Narduzzi's such an emotional coach, and we've talked about that before. He's definitely not one of our favorites, but he adds a little spice, into the ACC, so I guess we'll take it. That makes it fun, but really interesting to see them because they really should have had a shot at Penn State last weekend. They ended up losing that game 17-10. He made that really interesting call to kick the field goal instead of trying to go for it on 4th down on the 1-yard line. I don't really understand that with the amount of time left in that game. It didn't make any sense at all, and I think they kind of lost in the game. They turned right around against UCF. They go up early, and then they almost give that one away. Incredible drive at the end of the game to come and win. So, just back-to-back weeks against really good ranked opponents. Pitt clearly showed they didn't know how to win against Penn State. And it's true, like we talked about before, you need to learn how to win as a team. But then against, UCF, they showed that they did know how to win, and they pulled the old Philly special they called the Pitt special. I don't know if you saw that really awesome touchdown thrown to Pickett. It looked super awkward. I went back and I watched the Philly special from the Super Bowl, and it was way prettier. It was ugly. Ugly, but pretty cool win, man, to beat number 15. Like you said, it's always one big win a year. They beat Penn State a couple of years ago when Penn State went to the Rose Bowl, I believe, and they also beat Clemson a few years ago, right? So it is interesting to see how emotionally up and down they get.
Yeah, pick this game for me. North Carolina and Pitt, when they play, who's going to freaking win that game? No one knows.
As of now, I would just go with Pitt. I mean, the way that Pittsburgh's playing, they look much better, but that game's not going to happen for a few more weeks in November, I think.
Dude,
so
exactly. They're playing well right now, so it's time for them to just face.
That's hard. And UNC is going to learn a lot of lessons. Grandpa's going to pat him on the back and say, "It's okay, you lost your last couple. It's all right." That's actually good. I can't wait till we get to that point in the season because that's the point of the season I love. You think you understand every team. You think hey, this team is a good run defense. They're going to kill this team. This team is a great passing offense, a great slot receiver. And then they play each other and something ridiculous happens and the team that you thought would win by 2 touchdowns gets blown out. And you're like, what happened? Are these different people playing the game? Like, so I love November, man. It's good football. It's just such a hard season. We thought BC would be good. They go and just blow it to Kansas. They didn't even look that good against Rutgers this weekend. Like, what the heck is BC doing? Maybe they're trying to win just 7 games again this year. That seems to be Adazio's MO. Wake Forest looks surprisingly good. NC State we thought would be good. They laid a huge goose egg in West Virginia. This is a West Virginia team who sucks. Like, I don't think there's a better way you can put it. This West Virginia team does not look good. And we saw NC State travel to Morgantown and just lay an egg. It destroyed 44-27. And I think that really soured my opinion of NC State. And I think that game was the one that really changed my opinion of the ACC. Because there were only 4 or 5 teams with a chance to be ranked this year. And NC State was one of them. And not good, man. Not good.
I'm going to say this. That's exactly. I have a very low opinion of NC State as well. So low of an opinion that I am actually going to pick Florida State to beat them this weekend. That's how badly I think of NC State. Yeah. Wow. Right.
Dude, you always have trouble with them though. So that's actually kind of interesting.
They killed us last year. It wasn't even close.
Yeah.
They ran all over us. This no-name running back ran for like 300 yards. But, yeah, it's interesting. Florida State, I was watching the game this week, and I picked Florida State to lose. And we almost did again. We had a 21-0 lead in the first quarter, and I think every Florida State fan was like, sweet, now it's time to start losing the game once you go up by 2 touchdowns. And we did. They scored 24 unanswered points. It was 24-21 in the fourth quarter, and our kicker, who was usually pretty good, missed 3 field goals, probably by a combined like 50 yards horizontally. That's not an exaggeration whatsoever. And I think every Florida State fan just thought, all right, well, here we go again. Luckily, a couple plays were made. Alex Hornibrook had to come in, the transfer from Wisconsin, made a couple nice plays, a couple nice touchdown passes, and ended up scoring 14 straight to win the game. So I don't know if that's something that is kind of a precursor to what's going to come the rest of the season for Florida State. But I do think that you're right. NC State looks like garbage this year against a very not good West Virginia team who now you kind of see why Dana Holgerson left and like ran off for Houston. I didn't understand why he left. Now I kind of get it. The cupboard is pretty empty. So yeah, I mean, I don't think, Dave Doran, man, like he's one of those coaches we like to mention, I think, to me, honestly, man, some of the biggest, like, yes, you mentioned Boston College being a disappointment. I totally agree. But to me, the bigger disappointments this year so far have been NC State and Syracuse. Those are two teams that I thought.
No question.
Yeah, wow. Like, they were on the rise, going in the right direction. And then so far this season, really, really just not look good. And I think that's super disappointing for our conference.
But that goes back to something that needs to be more apparent to athletic directors. When you go and hire a coach from another school, you need to see if they actually coached the program and changed the culture around to get them good, or if they got one good recruit to get them good. Because if you're a Justin Fuente and you get a Paxton Lynch, at the last second from Florida to come into Memphis, sure, a guy who's that big and strong and has a great arm, he's going to destroy a whole bunch of those, American Athletic Conference opponents. So you need to analyze, how did Fuente do before him? How did his system actually change? Or was it one good guy? Look at what Dino Babers did up in Syracuse. It's the same type of thing. We thought that program was heading in the right direction, but what did they have? A quarterback. If you look down at Dave Doran, the reason why that program rose over the last few years, what did they have for 5 years? A quarterback. They had experienced, good quality quarterbacks at both of those schools the last few years, and that's why they got better and better. And as soon as they lost those quarterbacks, we turned to, DeVito at Syracuse, which everyone thought would be good, and he has not looked anywhere near as good. And then NC State, they've actually looked decent, quarterback play this year. Now, guys, they're sitting at 3-1. They're not awful by any means, but beating Ball State by 11, probably not the best win. Eastern Carolina they blew out, Western Carolina, but those teams, who cares? It's the out of conference games against big time Power 5 opponents, and they laid an egg against one who does not look very good. West Virginia, though, I mean, just to give them some credit, they are 3-1, but they beat JMU by a touchdown. They lost to a Missouri team that had just come off getting beaten by Wyoming, and then sure they beat NC State, but then they barely beat Kansas. So West Virginia is 3-1, but they're not a good 3-1, and you have to beat them. Like, if you want to be a mid to better Wolfpack team in the ACC, the Wolfpack has really got to, win those games. So they're going to come into a stretch this season where they play Florida State, which we expected to be a disappointment, and then they play Syracuse, the team that we honestly thought would be the second best team in the Atlantic this year. And I guess the truth is maybe Dino Babers isn't as good of a coach as we thought. He just had a great quarterback who fit his system. Now, granted, maybe if DeVito has a few more games in the system, he'll start putting up the same numbers. But as of now, it's not looking very good.
Yeah, it's a great point about Ryan Finley and Eric Dungy. The loss of both of those, veteran quarterbacks, you're really seeing that affect the conference this year. We're talking about the conference as a whole. Right now, you're looking at Clemson. And what's sad is that, all of these things I'm seeing on social media, online, any blog, anything, it always talks about, when they talk about the national conversation and the playoff conversation, you see stats like, Georgia has 5 ranked teams remaining on their schedule. Oklahoma has 3 ranked teams remaining on their schedule. Ohio State has 6 ranked teams left on their schedule. Clemson has 0. And so right now for our conference, Clemson's a great torchbearer, but unfortunately, they just don't have a lot. They can't do anything but blow teams out right now. That's all they can do, and unfortunately, that doesn't help them really at all. They can only be hurt by playing in the ACC right now, which is unfortunate, honestly.
So why do you think it is? Why do you think it is that the ACC 3 years ago we thought was the best conference in college football? And in reality, we knew the quarterback play was a big part of that. There were a lot of great quarterbacks, Deshaun Watson, guys like that. But then the conference fell off a cliff. It went from being the best conference to the SEC surged back up to the top, no doubt in my mind. And then the Big Ten made a resurgence. But then we even saw some good teams like, Texas comes back, things like that going on. What do you think has caused the ACC to fall down? Because a couple of years ago we were talking and we thought we made really good coaching hires and we thought that the recruiting had gotten a little bit better. What's happening? Why is it going downhill?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's a lot of layers to it. I would say the overarching answer would probably be that some of these coaches maybe are not what they were advertised to be or not what maybe we built them up to be. I know for us as Florida State fans, Willie Taggart, so far has not lived up to the billing. You look at the main difference in the Atlantic right now, it's a one-team division right now. It's not a 2-horse race like it used to be between Clemson and Florida State every year. Usually the winner of that game would go on to, win the conference or at least play in the conference championship game and also usually make the playoff. So you look at a lot of other young coaches, Dave Doran, Dino Babers, Bronco Mendenhall. In some ways it could be a factor of they are a victim of each other's successes. You could make the argument that if one of them was hired and not the others, that maybe that one would be more successful. But, so I heard someone compare the ACC to a really, really horrible NFL league. It's like there's so much parity within the league itself, just on such a low level.
Honestly, it's still a ton of fun to watch because, you watch UNC Wake Forest, you really don't know who's going to win because there's so many variables at play. It's actually a really fun conference to watch, but when you go out of conference, you need to win these games like West Virginia. Just 3 years ago, we saw the ACC beat the SEC in 75% of their matchups, and that included, I think it was Georgia Tech played 3 of them that one year and stuff like that, and that was a really great year for Georgia Tech. So remember, it was just a couple of years ago that Georgia Tech was going to the Orange Bowl, and Clemson was, doing great things with national title. But then, of course, we even saw UNC just a couple of years ago going and almost winning the ACC championship game against Clemson, right? So There's these teams. I think part of it is the better teams in the ACC now are not the ones that people want to see ranked. If you look at the best records, Clemson, okay, we'll give you that one. But you have the University of Virginia second best. They were really relevant in the 90s and early 2000s in football, but really not since then. People forget them in the national conversation. Only in basketball do they consider them. When you look at other teams with above 500 records right now, did you realize there's only 3 teams in the Coastal with above 500 records? Virginia at 4-0, Duke and Virginia Tech at 2-1. And because they play this Friday night, that means one of them is guaranteed to have at least a 500 record, so that's not good. You look at the Atlantic, a few more teams with good records, but it's teams like Boston College. Well, the only time people remember them being relevant is when Matty Ice was up there, Matt Ryan. Wake Forest, they were never relevant except the 2006 ACC championship win. But so if you look at it, when you see a team like Wake Forest receive votes, people say, oh, well, they're just getting lucky. They have an easy schedule and they have one good player. That's what people assume. When they see Miami ranked, they say, oh, it's Miami. Yeah, they're probably really good. They're on their way back. You see, it's a perception about it. So the fact that we do have some teams that are 4-0 like Wake who aren't even getting votes, it's just because people think it's going to be a fluke. They see Wake's schedule and they're like, okay, let's be real. They're going to lose at least 4 games by the end of the year. So versus you have a Texas. Now that Texas is winning, you're like, wow, their quarterback, Sam Ehlinger, is so good. They could win the national championship this year. Sure, I know they lost to Joe Burrow and LSU, but that was just one game, and they kept up with them. I could see Texas winning the Big 12. Like, it's something I could actually envision. But if you were to tell me that Kansas had a 4-0 record right now, I would not believe you for a second that they would win the Big 12. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's the household name combined with your schedule. And right now the ACC has the good teams in the ACC are not the powerhouses. And I think that just kills your national perception also.
Yeah, it's a great point, honestly. I mean, Wake Forest definitely honestly could be the second best team in the conference right now, but no one wants to hear that, like you said. And I will be really interested to see what Wake Forest does the rest of the season because, we like Clawson a lot. We think he's a good coach. He's obviously really handicapped and really handcuffed by the stipulations of that school being a private school with only 3,000 population, but they've had success in the past. Jim Grove had good teams there. Like you said, in 2006, when Riley Skinner was the quarterback, they made it and won the ACC, and they went on to the Orange Bowl. So it's going to be interesting to me. I think for our purposes this season, Georgia Tech losing to the Citadel, North Carolina losing to App State, Florida State losing to Boise State. These are all wins that really hurt national perception early on in the season, right? I mean, Duke gets blown out by Alabama. Yes, that was expected, but it was kind of added to a myriad of other teams, losing to teams that they shouldn't have. You add that to a Virginia struggling against Old Dominion. It's just really kind of going along with this kind of, I don't want to say propaganda because that makes it seem like it's, constructed by something, but really it's just, storyline of the ACC just being really weak. And then you see, I think it's added on to by the fact that, the Pac-10, or the Pac-12 rather, is really now starting to kind of resurge a little bit, kind of starting to find themselves as a conference. And then you have, obviously Oklahoma and Texas doing good things out in the Big 12. So you're seeing other conferences not struggle like this. I don't think that the ACC is a lot worse than they were last year, but because of other conferences coming up, it really seems that way. And I think when you lose to Group of 5 teams, that doesn't help your case at all.
So, I do have one bright note here. At least we don't have the takeaway pencil. Have you heard about this?
I have not.
Okay, so everywhere last year, the turnover whatever was on the rise. Of course, the classic turnover backpack, secure the bag, Florida State was retired this year. I don't know if you saw this, but Akron actually brought out the takeaway pencil. It's a humongous number 2 pencil. It's like 5 feet long. And it's a real number 2 pencil that they had made. I am not kidding. And they said it's a takeaway, not a turnover, because a takeaway means you forced it. You took it away, and it sounds better than a turnover. So you guys should look that up. Totally random. But yeah, Akron has a huge pencil because they care about academics also, apparently. But dude, when your football team has no wins in the season, I think they're 0-3. You've got to do something. Okay, I only mentioned that because I was reading ESPN's bottom 10, which is their 10 worst things that they've seen all year. And number 5 on the bottom 10 is #GoACC. And here's what it says. Looking back, we should have seen this coming when the conference's Week 3 opener was contested by UNC and Wake Forest, 2 ACC teams playing in what didn't count as an actual ACC game. From there, it was 24 hours of watching Howard's Rock roll down the hill toward a bushel of crushed oranges. BC became the first Power 5 team to lose a home game to Kansas in more than a decade. Florida State lost to Virginia for only the 4th time in 18 matchups. The Citadel used the same 2 antiquated triple option playbook that essentially pushed Paul Johnson out at Georgia Tech to beat Georgia Tech. Meanwhile, NC State and Pitt lost out-of-conference games that were actual out-of-conference games, while Virginia Tech should have lost to Furman. The ACC anchor weighed so heavy that number 121 Maryland was upset by Temple, and the Terps left the conference 6 years ago. Dude, bad. But it's all true. It's so true.
So true.
And I just jump into something totally random else here. It said the triple option being used at, not at Georgia Tech anymore, but it's used at the Citadel. Did you realize that I'm sorry, Cutcliffe, totally blank for a second. Did you realize he installed the triple option at Duke and they've been running the triple option this season multiple times?
I did not realize that.
Yeah,
really?
So I went back and started watching a bunch of their film this week because it's Virginia Tech game week, and I noticed that during the Alabama game, they started to run some triple option plays, and it was hit and miss. But with Quentin Harris back there, he's a much better runner than a passer. They've been running the triple option randomly. So they'll run like the spread, the pro style, and the triple option all in the same game. It's whack. I have not seen a team do that in a long time. So actually kind of cool. And I think that's why Duke's starting to play better and better. Just to give a quick spotlight, we all know, one of my absolute favorite coaches in all of college football is Coach Cutcliffe. Congratulations to one of his students, Daniel Jones, on winning his first NFL start, by the way, this weekend, replacing Eli Manning, who was another student of Cutcliffe back in the day. So always kind of fun. But yeah, so Duke has been looking a lot better just the past couple of weeks. Quentin Harris at quarterback has been doing an excellent job this season. So I'm kind of curious to see how they do against that Virginia Tech defense. They've not been that great this year, but they've been a lot better than previous. But Quentin Harris does have 8 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions, but he's ran for a couple hundred yards already on the season. But yeah, triple option at Duke. Didn't expect it.
That's fascinating, actually. I did not know that at all. I love multiple offenses. That's the best, in my opinion. I think we got to show some love. We talked about disappointing quarterbacks, not living up to the shoes of their predecessors. I think we got to talk about give some love to these other quarterbacks that are performing well, like a Quentin Harris at Duke, a Jamie Newman at Wake Forest, a Bryce Perkins at Virginia. These are guys that just really find ways to will their team to win, doing it with their legs and their arms. They're all playing well right now. Maybe we're just looking in the wrong place for good quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's actually kind of interesting. I think some of these guys are getting older, so obviously they won't be around next year, but a few of them, it'll be interesting to see their development. We do have some good quarterback stories. Obviously, Newman at Wake Forest, we've talked about him before. He's looked pretty good this season. That's a guy I did not even spotlight before the season started. At North Carolina, you've got, Sam Howell is young, a freshman coming in and starting and doing a great job. So it is going to be kind of interesting to see how some of these younger guys develop. I think Sam Howell and obviously Trevor Lawrence, but Trevor only really has a season left. It's going to be interesting to see how they continue to develop and push the conference. And Jamie Newman, he is a junior, but nobody really talked about him too much. And he's on a 1,300-yard, 12 touchdown, 2 interception clip so far this season. Really, really good. Just looking very excellent. So I know some of that's been against non-conference like Elon and Rice, but still looking pretty dang good. But just real quick to recap for you guys, I want to go over some of the picks that Ken and I made these past few weeks just to jump down them. In 2 weeks ago, the ones that Ken and I guessed differently or wrong is I took Wake, he took UNC, Grandpa let him down. So sorry. Boston
Always.
College, we took them and didn't expect Kansas to get their first road win against Power 5 in a decade. So clearly got that wrong. We guessed the other ones correctly. We both got NC State, West Virginia wrong, as we talked about. We both got the Citadel beating Georgia Tech wrong, obviously, because that's difficult. Then this week, it was a pretty interesting slate of games. The only ones we got different is I picked the upset of Pittsburgh over UCF. Just after seeing how they performed against Penn State the weekend before that, I thought, you know what? Maybe they'll figure out a way to execute. And Pat Narduzzi talked about that in his interview. He said that last week they had the plays, they just didn't execute. And they spent all week doing basically fine-tuning on the exact same plays almost, to just making sure that everything was perfect. And it really did show up in that game. They jumped out way ahead. UCF came back, and then Pittsburgh led a great drive to score that touchdown. We both guessed that UNC would beat App State because they should have beaten App State.
They should have.
App State, I believe, blocked a field goal at the end of that game to win. So very good for them. I always love a good field goal block to end the game. I think
Isn't that how they beat Michigan?
I believe so. A miss or a block. Back in '07,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the good old Lloyd Carr days. Yeah, but it was a long field goal. It was a 56-yarder. But yeah, Evans ran for 3 touchdowns for App State. Really good player. After Satterfield left there, I was kind of curious to see what would happen to App State because they've always been good. You know, last season, I think it was, or 2 seasons ago, you know, they almost beat Penn State at home. They've beaten Tennessee's. They've beaten Michigan's. And so I was interested to see after Satterfield left how they do. And App State looks like they're doing pretty well. So obviously, UNC should have won that game. Very disappointing. And then Ken did not trust Florida State. He went with Louisville and the aforementioned Satterfield and lost that game. I picked Florida State. I had a gut feeling, had to go with the Noles. And I'm drinking out of a Willie Taggart cup right now, Ken, that I got when I was down at the game with you. And I just want to say there's a bunch of hashtags on here. Make no excuses. Do something. Blame no one. Lethal simplicity. So just wanted to put those out there.
Hey, I will say this. Ever since we hired Kendall Briles as our offensive coordinator, the offense has looked incredible. I got to send you these stats, man. Like, from last year to this year, we're scoring like 20 more points a game. We're averaging like 12 more first downs a game. Like, the stats are insane, honestly. So, if it's not, like, our defense, pretty terrible. Not going to lie. Pretty awful. But offensively, we're doing all right. But, there's plenty of excuses I can make, so I'm not following the Willie code, I guess. Sorry.
Wow. In other news, did you see that your boy DeAndre Francois is playing at Hampton now?
I did see that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's not doing so hot also.
Yeah, it's interesting to always see how a guy, you know, who's supposed to be a good player, who's you know, picked highly and recruited heavily, see how he does at some of these lower level schools, and his focus seems a little off, maybe because of all the legal trouble he's in and the terrible, awful things he's done with women. But I just wanted to congratulate Hugh Freeze. Hugh Freeze's Liberty team blew out DeAndre Francois in Hampton 62-27 this last weekend. I happened to catch part of that on Game Tracker and was just looking into the stats and stuff. And so congrats to Hugh Freeze and his team. Obviously, we were talking about how he coached from a hospital bed just a few weeks ago. So I happened to look at Hampton's roster during that game, and I was like, wait, Francois threw it? Wait, who? What? And so I was a little surprised on that one. Definitely interesting. But yeah, so that's where we're at right now. I happen to be 4 games ahead of Ken. I've guessed 35 right out of the 45. He's guessed 31 right. We haven't been doing so hot this year, man. We really need to turn it around this week.
Yeah, I gotta stop trying and actually just not care, you know?
Dude, that's my life motto. Just don't care. I gotta ask you, what do you think about this ACC network, though? Just jumping back from earlier. What are your actual thoughts on all this that's going on?
All right, so I just don't like having to pay for those services. I mean, call me old school, but like, I don't know, man. I just feel like
this is what's happening. Every game that used to be on ESPN3 that you used to be able to watch on the app or whatever with your cable subscription or on your computer, they've just moved to the ACC network. So it's the exact same broadcast you got before. It's just instead of ESPN bringing trucks, the school has a studio set up. And we just have to pay for it. So when they say that, you know, Virginia Tech's going to make $50 million instead of $24 million, that's because, or whatever the numbers really are, that's because they just expect us to pay the money to the school. So instead of us donating, they're extracting it from us.
Yeah, I mean, it's just hard to make money these days, you know, with the weather getting a little cooler now. You know, guys aren't driving around late at night as much. And
wow.
This
is family friendly.
Sorry. What? I sell fishing equipment late at night. What are you talking about?
Wow, this is bad.
Dude, poles, fishing poles, like, you know, the 10-footers, 9-footers,
shut up.
good for pompano. Sorry, it's late.
Ken is a musician. He rents musical instruments to high school children. And I still don't know why they let him within 100 yards of a school.
It was a Chuck E. Cheese, and it was just this weird, misunderstanding.
Word.
It was.
Dude.
I thought Chucky was a woman. Never mind. You know what? We'll just move on.
And this is the last episode ever of ACC Audible, so we hope you guys have enjoyed listening to us. We're shutting it down.
Those sponsorships, but oh man, they're just gone.
Man, we just got some sponsors. Now they're going to drop us. Oh my word. Okay, so anyway, you just looking at the schedule this weekend. Virginia Tech Duke's the Friday night game. It's on ESPN. Cool, nationally televised. You need cable, but not hard to get. You look at the whole rest of the schedule, the only ones you can watch are ABC at 3:30 is Clemson, North Carolina, and the 3:30 NBC game just because of the NBC contract for UVA. All the other ones are on CBS Sports Network, ACC Network, and ACC Network Extra. I can't even watch them without a special package. And I don't know if you know this, but Comcast Xfinity still hasn't made a deal with the ACC Network. So the only cable provider where I'm at is Comcast. So I have to go and buy either a special package of Sling TV, View, YouTube TV, something like that in order to watch it. And I decided I wasn't going to watch. There's only 2 games that Virginia Tech had on the network, and they were, games that we should have just won. So we lost Boston College, but we beat Furman. So I didn't care to watch those anyway. So I went and watched them the next day on YouTube for free. But it is kind of disappointing. I know we should just shell out and shut up. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, guys, just pay money. You can afford it. But it's just difficult when last year we could watch the exact same games in our normal package, and then now we have to pay extra. It's just difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I get it, guys. Everything's moving towards streaming services. I understand that. I'm not saying that those are terrible, but I'm just saying, like football used to be kind of void of that, and then, you started getting the NFL Network, having to pay for that if you wanted to watch Thursday night games, and then, you have the SEC Network and the Longhorn Network, and it's just like, I just remember the good old days when you could just turn on ABC in the mornings and fix the rabbit ears a certain way on your TV, and you just see that just gleaming sheen off of Kirk Herbstreit's forehead. Yeah, you just miss that, We don't have that anymore, do we?
I think that obviously the issue with that is you only get 3 games a day. I think the peak was just a couple years ago when you had all these games on ABC, CBS, NBC, and multiple ESPN channels, including ESPNU. That was really like the highlight for me. Now just having to pay for all these different subscriptions, I love streaming only. Like if I could just pay for the ACC Network and nothing else on one of these streaming packages for, $20 a month, okay, I'd do it. They're a little bit more expensive than that, and you have to get other channels. But granted, it's way better than getting a $200 cable package. I'll give you that. But this is all I'm going to say that worries me a little bit. You look at NASCAR, for example. NASCAR signed a really lucrative deal with Fox Sports Network, Fox Sports 1, and NBC Sports Network, and their viewership has gone down since. And a lot of the reason is because a lot of the huge fans of NASCAR were people that lived out in the country, and they just tuned into network TV and watched because they couldn't afford cable. So then all of a sudden you make them sign up for cable, well, viewership just got cut in half. And then if you're not going to watch it, then why go to a race? Like, I haven't paid attention all season. Why pay to go? And you've seen a lot of the same with the NFL. The NFL's moved to some of these separate networks where Monday Night Football used to be ABC. Now it's ESPN. Okay, that was a few years ago, granted. But then Thursday night, like you said, Thursday night, you have to have the NFL Network to watch it. And they used to only do Thursday games from Thanksgiving on. Now they do Thursday games every weekend in the NFL. So in order to watch all your favorite teams, you have to buy a special package. And a lot of people, like myself, decided it wasn't worth spending the money. And then when you stop watching it, you get more disconnected from it and you don't want to go to games. So I'm kind of wondering if with the ACC, if that's going to happen at all, or with college football overall. College football has enjoyed huge growth over the past few years, but now nearly every conference has their own network. I really do wonder how this is all going to work out. If it was all streaming, if none of this was on TV, I think it would work out fine. But the fact that they're still mixed in with cable packages is just making it weird.
We're talking a lot about packages and growth and polls right now, so we should probably move on to something else.
Wow. Friday night, 7 p.m., ESPN, Duke at Virginia Tech. Who do you have in this football game?
You know what? It's tough, man. No offense to your Hokies, but I'm lost a lot of faith in old Fuente. I used to be a big Fuente supporter. Not so much anymore. Any chance we're going to see old QP play any this year, man? Any Quincy Patterson?
Nobody knows, man. It's been interesting. So Hooker came in. He's the registered number 2, and he played a little bit when Ryan Willis went out a couple weeks ago. He was hit and fumbled, and they said it was a mix of injury / ball securities why Willis didn't play for a little bit after that. But Hooker came in, and he's been trusted with the ball a little bit. He can run better than he passes, so he's clearly the backup. We've not seen any QP at all. So I'm very curious to see if Quincy Patterson is developing well or not. He was an Elite 11. There was a lot of promise there. He's supposedly very intelligent. I'm kind of disappointed I haven't seen him at all, not even in some sort of package. And I think the hope was when we played Furman a couple weekends ago that we would be winning by enough that he could play. But obviously, we barely beat them by a touchdown. He didn't get to play. Ryan Willis has struggled this year. 7 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He's also had a couple of fumbles. He's turned it over as many times as he's had touchdowns. You've got to imagine some of the backup options are better. I don't know why Willis has been so inconsistent. I would love to see QP play, but preferably when we're beating Duke by 30 points, which is not going to happen. But I would love to see him on the field at least once.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'll make my pick quickly after this. But I will say, Florida State did work Alex Hornibrook into the game plan last Saturday against Louisville. They were going to play him every third series, and then Blackman ended up getting hurt, so Hornibrook had to play the rest of the game. But, I would like to see Fuente work Patterson in some capacity, like you said, maybe a special package or every third series, whatever the case is, just to kind of switch things up a little bit. I mean, this is kind of a, hot seat year for him. He's got to kind of see the writing on the wall a little bit. The closer things get to a firing, the closer coaches get to doing things that maybe aren't the most logical, but you might think that he starts to put Patterson in, see what the young kid can do. But, I'm going to go with Duke on this one. I think that right now, Duke's, they're playing pretty well. We just talked about Quentin Harris. It's going to be interesting. Obviously, Virginia Tech late on a 7 p.m. Friday night. It's a tough place to play. But, going back to last year, Lane Stadium's lost a little bit of that home field advantage, so I'm going to go with Duke in this one.
Yeah, definitely. Even though it's still loud at Lane Stadium, the team has just underperformed big time, especially at home, but overall the past couple of years, honestly. I'm going to go with Virginia Tech in this game because I have to. But it's just disappointing, honestly, to see how they've played this year. But it seems like King, the freshman at running back, has been getting better and better. There's some really good receivers on Virginia Tech. If Willis can figure it out and the team can get into a groove, they can really put up a lot of points. I hope they can. Duke returned, I think, 10 of 11 starters this season on defense, but they were not very good last year. They've been a lot better this year, but still they're giving up a decent amount of pass yardage. I'm hoping that Ryan Willis can take a little bit of advantage of that. Last season, we actually did see QP get worked into a couple games, like you're saying, series-based, right? And that was so cool to see him, but it was mainly in running situations. They had him run the ball, like up the middle as the quarterback. Not very exciting. He threw one pass. It was incomplete. So it would be cool to see him get worked in. I'm going with the Hokies on this one. The Saturday slate, fairly simple. Ken and I are both going with Syracuse over Holy Cross, and we're both going with Pittsburgh over Delaware. That's a noon game and a 12:30 game. Jumping to the 3:30 time slot, there's 4 games. Clemson at North Carolina. Big game for UNC to host Clemson in the crossover.
Yeah, I expect this to be a kind of a close game, actually. North Carolina really kind of hurting after that App State loss. Probably will look to rebound pretty strong against number 1 Clemson. Of course, it's interesting. Clemson hasn't been talked a lot about in the national scene this year. They haven't been able to play a lot of high-profile teams. Trevor Lawrence seems to be going through kind of a sophomore slump a little bit. So I expect this game to be a lot closer than maybe some pundits are saying. But I'm still going to go with Clemson getting the win at Chapel Hill.
Yeah, just seeing North Carolina, that 24-18 loss to Wake, and then they followed up with a home game with App State where they lost by 3. Pretty bad, man. Just not good. And after those first 2 wins against South Carolina and Miami, we expected a lot. All super close games, though. Reminds me of Florida State, where they're also sitting at 2-2 with super, super close games. You got to go with Clemson in this one. I think it's a no-brainer. If somehow they pull the upset, then Mac Brown, you're a champion. I don't know how you did it. Number 18, Virginia at number 10, Notre Dame. Notre Dame barely fell any spots in the poll after their loss this week, but they look like they were a pretty dang good complete football team that just needs to polish up a couple of things. They're getting a 90% chance on ESPN and a 12.5-point spread to beat the University of Virginia. Ken, who do you have in this? 4-0 Cavs or the 2-1 Fighting Irish?
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit earlier in the podcast. I think that I'm going to go with the Irish in this one. You can't even really consider that, embarrassing or they lost to Georgia, but it was a great game. They were in it the whole way. I think a lot of people expected Notre Dame to get blown out in that game, actually, considering how many rushing yards they were giving up going into that game. But I think they proved a lot to a lot of people. I'm going with the Irish. I think Virginia is a good team. I don't think they're a fraud, but I will say I don't think they get the win at South Bend, Indiana.
If I pick the upset, would you think that's crazy?
I wouldn't actually. I wouldn't because, honestly, I could make a case for it. Notre Dame maybe sleepwalking a little bit after a very physical game in Athens. So, Virginia maybe because of a dark horse upset. I could see it.
Yeah, I think it's pretty dang clear that Notre Dame is the better team right now. I think they just are. You mentioned the run defense. That's really an interesting thing to me. They were giving up a ton of yards on the ground going into that Georgia game. Everyone expected Georgia to just run over them, and their defense actually didn't do an awful job in that game. Kind of surprised by that, to be honest. It's funny how sometimes you don't look good against lesser opponents, but then against better opponents, you come out and you look good. Notre Dame's an interesting team to me. We saw them play against Louisville. We've talked about that game extensively. Louisville actually had the lead there for a while and hung in pretty good. I'm just to do it. I'm 4 games up on you. Why not? Virginia Cavaliers. Gonna go with them. Who cares? I do. Okay, moving to the next game. Georgia Tech is playing Temple. Dude, this is a very interesting game because Georgia Tech traveling to Temple at Lincoln Financial Field. That's where Jeff Collins is going to get to go back home. He was just the head coach of the Temple Owls. Temple looking like a pretty good football team this season. We obviously saw them beat Maryland just 2 times ago when they were on the field. They beat 21-ranked Maryland 20-17. They followed that up with a loss at Buffalo. A little surprising. Georgia Tech, on the other hand, we've seen they got blown out by Clemson this year. They barely beat USF, and then they lost to the Citadel. This is a very, very tough game to pick in my mind. A lot of people are going big time with Temple. They're a 9-point favorite at home. They're getting 67% on ESPN. It's hard to not pick the Temple Owls in this football game. So I'm going to go with Temple.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Temple as well. Georgia Tech's not been impressive this year. A lot of growing pains switching from a triple option attack to a pro-style offense. We're seeing that this year. And Temple's look good this year, so I'm going to go with the Owls.
Yeah, that Temple loss against Buffalo is really what's throwing me off. But, everyone has a bad game. Let's hope they have one this week and that Georgia Tech wins that out-of-conference game because, come on, Georgia Tech. You got to get going. You're only picked to win 2-3 games this year, but get them out of the way early. Okay. Next, Wake Forest at Boston College. This game is really intriguing. Tickets as low as $14 to go to Chestnut Hill, which is cheaper than buying the ACC Network, which this game is on. So maybe you just want to go to the game if you're in the area. This is a 4-0 Wake Forest team versus a 3-1 Boston College team. This is a great game. Who do you have in this one?
I'm going to go with Jamie Newman.
Oh, yeah.
And the Demon Deacons. Just honestly, I feel like he's playing really well right now. We've talked about some of the struggles that BC's gone with this year and just kind of the underachieving this year. I got to go with the Demon Deacons.
They're a 7-point favorite in this game already. And, this is one of those games I feel like BC is just going to come pound the ball and win, right? Like they're just going to stick their hands in the ground as offensive linemen, just get dirty, and they're going to just try to win. I'm going to go with Wake, though.
Dudes.
I'm going to go with Wake because they're a better team right now. But I can see if BC can get that running game actually figured out, and if Brown can actually continue to make safe throws. By the way, he hasn't thrown a pick this year yet with 6 touchdowns thrown. I really think they could be a good team, Boston College. But just from what we saw last week, a lackluster win against Rutgers. I watched part of that game, and I know part of it's because it was at Rutgers, and it was just a dead atmosphere. But that game was awful to watch. And the commentators on the Fox Network, Big Ten Network, were so bad to watch. It just gave a bad feeling about Boston College. I'm going with Wake in this one. But I'm looking forward to watching that game, or at least tracking it on my phone and watching it later, because that should be a really, really good matchup. Looking through the rest of the weekend schedule, not too much more going on in the old ACC, except for a game you might be familiar with, Ken, which you've already kind of picked. NC State at Florida State at the Doak, 7:30 p.m. You going to go to this game?
I'm not going to go to this game. I'm going to be out of town, but I am going to also not watch it on TV, and I will also maybe watch it, the condensed version, 30-minute version on YouTube on the following Monday.
Oh, yeah.
If I don't have plenty of other things to do, which I will, so I probably won't. But that being said, I'm going to pick Florida State to win. I think they gained some confidence coming back after being up, when they haven't come back after being up many times before in this season. So I think the offense is playing really well right now. Inconsistent at times, yes, but overall playing much better than last year. The offensive line is playing a lot better this year too. They're still not very good, but they're not nearly as much of a disaster as they were last year. So much so that there's been no media attention on them this year, which is all you can ask for. So I'm going with Florida State in this one. I think I think they get the win pretty easily over NC State.
They say as an offensive lineman, if you're in the news, you're not doing a good job. So your thing about the offensive line not being in the media, that shows a lot. Honestly, it shows that they're doing much better. Great job of the new offensive line coach there this year. Yeah, this one is a tough one for me to pick. Y'all are actually touchdown favorite at home. The defense is really what concerns me here. The first half, your offense has been on fire. The second half, pretty much nothing. And your defense has given up 466 yards, especially passing yardage. It's going to be a really difficult win to win. But if you look at NC State, their pass defense, or their defense overall, isn't giving up that many points per game. But then you look at their opponents, that's because of the ECU and WCU games are making them look better with 0 and 6 points given in those two. Against West Virginia, they get 44. Against Ball State, 23. They're going to have to give up some points to you guys, at least 30-something. That Florida State defense can probably hold them down to 30 points. I'm going to go with the Noles in this one as well, man. So we're gonna knot up in that last one.
I will say, too, there's a couple things I should mention about this game. A couple of different X factors. Blackman, it looks to be day-to-day and probably will not play in this game. So Alex Hornibrook gets the entire game to show what he can do. So that's an X factor. Haven't seen him play a whole game yet. And then also the hiring as an analyst of Jim Leavitt, who was formerly Oregon's defensive coordinator. He got hired the second or third week of the season to come on staff as a defensive analyst. And I will say, since he's come on board, the defense has continually gotten better each week. Had a pretty good performance against UVA, even though they gave up 3 touchdowns in the last quarter, but actually that was better than what they had come from. And then last week, they shut down Louisville in the fourth quarter at the end when it really counted. So I think the defense is improving. They have a long way to go to be considered decent, but I think they are getting better. And with the offense performing the way they are, I think this team is actually starting to head in the right direction.
Yeah, speaking of extra hires and stuff during the season, I did see that analyst hire. Virginia Tech actually went and they hired Jerry Kill a couple weeks ago, so this is going to be his first game as the special assistant to the head coach at Virginia Tech. He and Justin Fuente have been friends for years. Obviously, Kill was a head coach that turned around the Minnesota football team, and then he had to retire for health reasons. He came back and was offensive coordinator at Rutgers a little bit, and he's done a few other things, but he really can't be involved in coaching too much because of his health. I believe he has epilepsy and some other issues like that. But he's a really, really good coach, and Fuente's known him for years, and a lot of people speak very highly of him. He's a multiple-time Coach of the Year award winner, including Big Ten Coach of the Year. And so I'm excited to have him at Virginia Tech just to give his opinions on both offense and defense. If you look at Kill and what he's done in his career, literally everywhere has won more games after he's been there. I mean, when he was at Southern Illinois, they won 1 game his first year, and then he ended up taking them to the playoffs 5 straight years. He never won a postseason game, though, I don't believe, which is kind of funny. But he turned around Northern Illinois. You know, he made them from a losing team to a winning team. He turned around Minnesota. So it's going to be interesting to see how some of these new analysts and assistants are going to help these football teams. So anyway, thank you guys again for joining us. It's going to be an exciting week of ACC football. Some of the teams are marginal and average at best, but there are teams that are marginal and average at best, and we love them. So, guys, we hope you have a great week. For Ian and Ken, we'll talk to you next week. Let's go ACC.